Hey there, perfect peeps. I got to sit down with Max from Stytch, or should I call it Twilio? I guess they just announced that Twilio acquired Stytch, so congratulations. He built out a Chatagotchi app, which is built on top of OpenAI's App SDK. So he has a MCP server that you can feed your Chatagotchi and it responds to it. We break all that down and why OAuth is important in this flow. Check it out. So Max, tell me a little bit, like, you've been at Stytch a while now. What does Stytch do and kind of where do you sit within it?
Yeah, I'm a product engineer at Stytch. We're a consumer identity and access management company. So a lot of software on the internet, a lot of websites, they've got users. Users need to authenticate to websites to prove who they are, and there's many, many different ways that they can do that. People come in with passwords, with email magic links, social sign-in like Google or Microsoft, and then a lot of enterprise stuff like signing in using protocols like OpenID or SAML. And we take all of that data and we build tools that help developers manage that, so you don't have to worry about building your own sign-in form. And that's where I spent most of my career at Stytch, probably like the first 3 years. And then the last year, we've kind of flipped it on its head. We want to take user data and push it out to other systems. So all of these login methods are about taking user data from available sources or from different credentials that people have lying around and pulling that into your system and authenticating it. And I focus on taking that data and pushing it out using standards like OAuth and SAML. So there's a sign in with Google button on probably a couple million websites right now. If you ever wanted to build that kind of sign in with your website experience, like share your data with external apps or with multiple websites that you own, then you kind of want to become an OAuth provider. And that's what I help people do.
That's awesome. I love that. Mostly back end or front end or a mix of both?
Mix of both. A lot of what we do is like front end SDKs. So we have like UI and widgets that people drop onto their websites, which
Okay.
is a little bit different than traditional front end where you own like the entire website that's operating. Like I write code and I don't know where the code is going to run or what website it's going to run on, which is a little bit of a mental shift.
Yeah, for sure.
But anything that needs to get done, we try to make it happen.
Very cool. Love it. Thanks, Max, for bringing this up. I love the idea of kind of going through OAuth flow and MCP and how they start together. So I'm excited for this.
Yeah. Yeah, so let's see. We got some sales marketing material, but let's talk about OAuth. So OAuth is not like a single thing. OAuth is a pretty large collection of protocols that's been published over the last several years, and these protocols come from organizations like the IETF and the OpenID Foundation. And last time I went and counted, there's actually 40 plus RFCs. So it's a pretty big body of work. And the nice thing about using OAuth and kind of participating in this ecosystem is there's thousands of companies and tens of thousands of security experts and developers that have like spent time with this protocol and working out all of the bugs and all of the security issues and making it really battle standard. And so you don't have to reinvent everything from scratch. You get to kind of stand on the shoulders of others and reuse what's already there, which is really, really nice.
I've read through some of these RFCs, and I got to tell you, it's nice for putting me to sleep at night.
Some of them are pretty dry. Anything that's encryption related is just over my head. But a lot of the OAuth ones, some of them can get pretty short. Like the 7 or 8 page ones are really good.
We'll probably talk about this a little bit in the MCP side too, but all the words of like should and must and
Yeah.
it's like, oh my gosh, all right.
Yeah. I think, the first time I read an RFC, I was like, oh my God, this is terrible. And then I came back, the next week because I had like a job I needed to do. And I read the RFC again and I was like, well, that was a little bit easier to get through. And then every time you go back and you like reread the same paper, it all clicks a little bit more and it just becomes a bit easier. And then, the 10th time you sit down with the document, you're like, all right, I think I know what's going on now.
That's good. Your memory is better than mine then.
Yeah. So OAuth kind of helps solve this general internet problem of taking user data from one place on the internet and sticking it somewhere else. This is something that happens kind of all over. If you've got multiple websites, it's really common to share your data from one website to another. It's really common to share your data from a website to a native app, like something running on your computer, like Slack or Zoom, or something running on your phone. And it's really common to share your data even to devices like televisions. And OAuth is about how the user and the service provider, the thing that owns the data, work together to agree how this data should be shared. And so terminology time, there's three moving parts in your standard OAuth flow. There's your authorization server or your identity provider. There's a resource server, and its job is to actually, own the API and own the data that is given out. And then there's a client that wants to access data in the resource server. And so the client needs to go to the authorization server and request permission to access the data. The authorization server is going to give an item called an access token to the client. And then the client can present that access token to the resource server, which will say, okay, cool, here's your data. So my favorite example, let's say you've got Netflix. Netflix.com is going to be your authorization server. And then the big boxes in the cloud that actually have all of the movies in them, those are going to be your resource servers. And your client is going to be your smart TV at home. So when you're on the couch, you're delegating your TV permission to go and watch movies on your behalf. And Netflix.com helps keep track of all of that. So this is all about getting an access token. And access tokens are really specific types of credentials that are scoped to the user who granted them. And this means that a client is only able to do something that the user could already do by themselves. And the user can also scope down the permissions given to the client. So you're not giving the client full access to your account and your data. You're only giving it access to the type of data that you want to share. Like, I probably want my TV to be able to watch movies on my behalf. I don't want my TV to be able to read and edit my credit card data. And so OAuth, there are many different ways to get an access token. The most common is the authorization code flow. And this is a little flow diagram showing it. And we won't get too deep into the weeds here on all the different parts of the flow. But the one thing I want to touch on is that OAuth really defines the spots in between. So OAuth defines how the app talks to the resource server or how the app talks to the identity provider, but it doesn't define everything going on. Specifically, one of the jobs of the resource server is it has to handle user login. I need to log into Netflix or I need to log into Google in order for these services to know who I am, so they can turn around and issue access tokens identifying me. The Netflix can't tell my TV, oh, you're logging in, you're accessing Max's data, unless Netflix knows that I'm Max in the first place. And so things like user login and consent, totally outside the realm of OAuth. You're free to do whatever you want when you implement that. And because anything can happen there, that gives us a lot of freedom when we're building our services. Specifically, when it comes to user login, there's many, many different ways that people can log in, whether that's using tools like passwords or Face ID or email magic links, whether there's MFA involved, whether you're using a protocol like SAML. And so Stytch kind of started building just the login flow, and now we've expanded out into the rest of the diagram.
That's crazy. There's so many things you have to account for in this flow. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, it's like every single thing is, simple on its own, I think. Like building, just a password login, not too bad. Little bit of work, got to be careful. But if you go and you are reading with good docs and you figure out hashing and so on, sure, you can build passwords. But then you want to build MFA, so you need a Twilio integration to send SMS, or you need to learn about OTP. And then there's 20 other things. And it's very difficult when you stack all of those in parallel. You're like, oh my gosh, this is actually going to take me 3 to 6 months to build out a login experience the way I want it with all the things I want. Or you go with a vendor and help them, hope that they smooth over a lot of the challenges.
I'd often get the question, why don't we just build it? And it's like, oh, you have no idea how long that's going to take.
Yeah. You can build a simple login form in an afternoon. You can build full, consumer identity access management in a lifetime. OAuth has been around for a long time, but it's come into the spotlight recently as part of the MCP, or the Model Context Protocol. And MCP, just as a refresher, is a generalized way for LLMs and agents to talk to different sources of data. So there are many LLMs out there. We've got like ChatGPT, Claude, Mistral, Olama, all sorts of stuff. And then we also have many, many different sources of data, whether that's like local data, like files or databases, or remote data, like your GitHub account, your Slack account, your Google Drive. And we don't really want to spend all this time writing a bunch of custom glue code to take every agent and connect it to every MCP server or every data source. We kind of want to define a unified protocol and make everything plug and play.
The interesting part that I always think about on MCPs is like, why didn't we have just a standardization of APIs that could do this? But we can talk more. It's just always something that's floating around in my head. I feel like a lot of people are actually just taking like an open API spec and wrapping a MCP server around it, which don't do that, folks, just to let you know. But we'll dive in more. I'll have more questions around it.
And so MCP servers kind of come in two different flavors. I have spicy opinions on this. There are local MCP servers where if you're running, Claude Desktop, like Claude Desktop will spin up a local, copy of your code downloaded from the internet, and then make queries to that over standard I/O over like a classic Linux pipe. And then there's remote MCP servers that are how we typically think of APIs. It's a service, it's running on the internet. You don't really know where it's running or how it's running, and you can just plug in a URL and be off to the races. And I think that local MCPs are important in some cases, like things like code editing or dealing with local files or pictures. Like you don't need a web service to do that; it has to run on your machine. But local MCPs to communicate with remote services, like a local MCP to talk to GitHub or a local MCP to talk to Jira, doesn't really make any sense to me. One, you're trying to get a lot of people to download like software and run it locally, which is a big security problem. And also a lot of these tools are built around using NPM or pip as like package managers, which non-technical people can't use. If you need to tell people that in order to run your MCP server, you need to pop open a shell and run some certain commands, and you need to have Python downloaded and so on, like you're excluding 95% of the world straight off the bat. They're just not going to be able to use your product. So it's a great way to build and package developer tooling, but it's a bad way to build like a mass market, like a commercial experience. And then similarly, when remote MCP servers first came up, they were wrapping APIs one-to-one. And a lot of these API keys or a lot of these APIs are using API keys. And this is a similar problem where it's kind of okay if you're a developer. If you're watching this podcast, like you probably know how to use an API key. You can probably figure out what an environment variable is. But again, 95% of the world doesn't know how to do that. If you wanted to go and build like an educational service using MCP and you want to roll it out to a high school, what are you going to do? You're going to give every student their own API key? Like I just don't see it going well. I don't see it getting like the mass market adoption. But OAuth is something that all of us do every day, multiple times a day. Anytime we're logging in with Google or with Facebook, we're using OAuth, and you don't need to be technical in order to take advantage of it. When we apply OAuth to MCP, these MCP clients become OAuth clients, MCP servers become resource servers, and MCP servers need an authorization server that they delegate identity to. So your MCP server doesn't know what your password is. You don't log into an MCP server. You log into an existing identity provider that issues an access token, and then the MCP client will use that access token to talk to the MCP server.
Have you found in your kind of utilizing this that some, and maybe you're getting to DCR, so if you are, I can repeat that later, but I'm curious if you've run into like VS Code when you use it to connect. It's like spinning up a new client every single time, whereas like Claude Desktop's like, no, I can reuse the current one I have. Have you kind of experienced that in testing out different products and the way they actually implement going about like both dynamic client registration and then like actual like token and what that looks like?
Yeah, everybody is different. Everybody has kind of different minutia. in what they do and how they deal with client identity. So like the spec says, sure, you can spin up a client every single time. You can generate a new one. You can request a new client identity. You also don't need to do that. And I think so. Like, yeah, if VS Code is asking a new client every single time, and then Claude is saying, well, I'm going to save this client in like a JSON file locally and reuse it. I think ChatGPT will also, if you add a connector at like the organization level using their business plan,
Yeah.
then that one client ID is going to be shared against everybody in your organization in your ChatGPT account. And all of those are like valid behaviors. It's just a matter of implementation decisions, and like as an authorization server, you have to be able to support and like guide your customers through all of those use cases. So again, it's like one of those things where you think, oh, sure, I can do the authorization code flow in a day, and you can probably get something working in a day. But there's just so much complexity underneath the hood that needs to be wrangled.
Yeah.
Um, this is, yeah. Also, the question of like what MCP clients are willing to request a refresh token or use a refresh token if you give it to them is again like a totally separate thing. Just every implementation is slightly different.
Yeah, I mean, the amazingly fun thing is like the Wild West all over again. Everything's getting access everywhere, but it's also like a security nightmare too, how these things are getting implemented. I think I read the other day, like every 12 minutes there's a new hack through like AI agents and MCP servers. So it's bad.
Yeah, yeah. And especially now, like if you want to target a website, if you want to start hacking and poking around, like not only do software engineers get, the benefits of AI tooling, like I can go and ask Claude to write some code. And now I'm also on the hook for all of this code I'm producing with Claude. Is it still secure now that I'm writing so much more of it? But also attackers can go and ask AI agents to write code and to help them when they're making attacks. And it's kind of an unfair advantage, right? Like we go on the software side, we get to produce more code. And now we have more security risk we're taking on if we're generating a lot of code using LLMs, and we have to use tooling to deal with that risk. But if I'm an attacker, like it's just more is more. I'm not having to defend myself against anything. So if you're running a small service on the internet, it's now much easier for attackers to get you in their crosshairs and put together a script
Yeah,
to exploit your website in a way where maybe like 2 or 3 years ago it wouldn't be worth their time. But now,
absolutely.
just
Yeah.
because they have they're aided by these LLMs, they can be a lot more productive.
Yeah, it's frightening. No, it's just a new experience, something that we have to make sure we are covering as engineers. Yeah, so we talked a little bit about OAuth, and then we kind of dove into MCP servers and how OAuth's used in that. We're kind of in this next generation of like apps and like the apps SDK that was just released by ChatGPT, and I know a few others. Google's doing something similar to this as well. Can you help me understand and like wrap my mind around what this next phase of apps SDK might bring to us?
Yeah, yeah. So the initial MCP kind of API said that MCP calls are remote procedure calls. So you invoke some function on a machine running somewhere else. You pass in a blob of JSON, and you get probably JSON, maybe sometimes text or some other format back. But it was all text to text, and that works great for a lot of use cases. It doesn't work phenomenal for a kind of like mass market adoption. Like you want to build an everything app, you want to build an agent that can talk to anything. And so people have been like for months now thinking about the generative UI use case. How can I talk to ChatGPT? Like I think a couple of months ago, ChatGPT started, generating images and generating charts, like writing code to put together chart output inside the ChatGPT side, and that was UI driven from OpenAI. But we didn't have UI driven from the connectors and the different data sources that OpenAI could talk to. So if I am running a brand on the internet, if I have a large site like I'm Nike, and I want to put Nike UI inside ChatGPT, we hadn't really cracked the code on that. And that's really what the Apps SDK is about. The Apps SDK lets MCP connections return essentially HTML and JS, and then ChatGPT will render that inline and use that to build like interactive experiences in chat that are driven by other companies, which is really, really, really cool if you're a company that wants to talk to your customers inside ChatGPT.
And what is the kind of comparison when we talk like Apps SDK for OpenAI versus like the MCP UI?
Mm-hmm.
Is that more of a generic kind of subset of UI?
Yeah, so MCP UI is an MCP extension working group. And I think that they're trying to build this out in the open in a common standard, while the ChatGPT Apps SDK is pretty much only for ChatGPT.
Okay.
And so, like, I think what I've heard is that these things are trying to converge over time. Like, ChatGPT wants to use open standards, but the open standards are still developing and they want to like start playing around and figure out what works and what doesn't in the meantime. So hopefully in the future, like OpenAI is doing their thing, Google's doing their thing. I'm sure Anthropic and Claude are going to do their thing in the future. And hopefully it all converges in the same way that MCP has converged because
Yeah.
open standards just make everyone's lives a lot easier.
It kind of like makes me wonder if we're reinventing the wheel to a degree though. Like I feel like I could, create a website and have it do what I needed to do with my own HTML and UI. And I guess you still could do that, but like this is kind of taking an ecosystem, like maybe an Apple approach to like, hey,
Mm-hmm.
you're in our universe now. We're gonna do it this way. And I feel like somewhat frightened as kind of a OSS developer and things like that, that like they're just gonna plug in and the next thing you're gonna have is like an apps store that comes out for Chat GPT and that's how they're gonna make more money. Do you feel like that's coming or do you
Oh,
or like
absolutely.
okay.
Yeah, I think it's very, very, very similar to the Apple App Store when it first came out, where people said, "Oh, we need to be in the App Store."
Yep.
And the interesting thing about the App Store initially was like the distribution, right? Like you could do anything that you wanted to do in a typical website in the App Store, but then you weren't in the App Store.
Yeah,
And it took a bunch of years for us to figure out like what makes a good app. Why would you want to have a native app versus something in the browser? Like what are the, what do you get out of a business from being in this distribution channel versus that distribution channel?
totally.
And I think like, is ChatGPT an app? Is ChatGPT an operating system or a runtime? Like what is it going to be, 3, 4 years from now is
Yeah.
something that we're still very much figuring out. And I think there's going to be a lot of churn. And I think a lot of people are going to make apps or ChatGPT apps that they don't necessarily need to make. And we're going to learn a lot in the process. And that's just kind of like the nature of the bleeding edge, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I feel like I saw things like this with Google and like their I think it's called Home Hub or something similar to that. It was a thing that had a screen and you could write Flutter to it. And I was like, oh, this is gonna be the next thing, and like never took off. And so it's just kind of curious to see like when there's mass market adoption like ChatGPT has, like what they're going to plug into it and how to access that. But I do think it's really cool that at least they're providing an SDK so you can like put things in there and kind of not closing off the system fully and only having their apps run everything. So
Hmm.
that's great.
Yeah. Yeah. A little bit before my time, I think, but I'm pretty sure like the Yahoo homepage back in the day, you could have widgets as well.
Yeah, that's right.
And I
That
think the
was exactly my
implementation
time.
was very similar. It's the widget is an iframe. You stick the iframe in the host application. You have 20 iframes running in parallel.
Yep. And then we found out
And
how bad iframes were.
oh well, don't say that because this is all iframes too.
We'll see how much trouble they cause, but hopefully they stay. There's been a lot of work, I'll say, that's been done around iframes since Yahoo days.
Yeah.
Cool.
So
So yeah, I think you were gonna kind of show off like how to maybe create an app, a quick one or something.
yeah, so we have if you've ever played Tamagotchi, which was, the very, very fun, memorable part of my middle school. You've got a little pet that you basically take care of and you feed it and you play with it and it grows up. And so I went and I built a Chatagotchi, a Tamagotchi game that you can play inside ChatGPT using the Apps SDK.
I feel like this is one of those things that said like wake me up in the middle of the night to get like fed or something. Like this was introducing you how to be a parent. It was kind of frightening.
Yeah, they were training us. Fortunately, this one lives inside your chat. You can't go and send you a
Okay,
push
good.
notification, and it's very. I find the
Respect.
game a little fun, but it should certainly be a little less time consuming than a little egg beeping at you in your pocket.
Hopefully it respects the do not disturb mode, right? Cool. Yeah,
Yeah,
let's see it.
yeah. So we've got an MCP server running here, and then what I'm going to do inside ChatGPT is I'm going to go into settings, apps and connectors, and then advanced settings down at the bottom, and turn on developer mode. And that gives us this little create button up here, which gives us the ability to drop in, a name, a description, and then an MCP server URL. And I believe I already have created the Chatagotchi app before. And so here's my URL. And we can also see the different MCP tools that exist.
That's
So I've got a tool to start a new game. I've got a tool to feed my pet, a tool to play with my pet, and then a tool to list all my achievements that I've unlocked over the course of my different games. And I want to go and connect. So I'm going to hit this button, and this is going to kick off an OAuth flow. So before I can give ChatGPT an access token to access my data, the identity provider needs to know who I am, so I have to log in. I'm going to log in with Google. And now I've got an OAuth consent screen, and I can say, all right, ChatGPT is accessing my data. What's it going to get the ability to do? Well, it gets the ability to invoke all of the tools we just saw. And of course, I'm going to allow this. And we
now,
redirect.
was
Yeah.
your authorization server, was that Stytch on the back end of that kind of presenting the Google? Cool.
Yeah. So Stytch was responsible. That first screen that we looked at over here. This is our drop-in SDK. So this is a little React component. And then a little bit about Stytch under the hood. Like the React components and the SDKs is not our core product. Our core product is a direct API that lets people build their own flows.
Cool.
So in a lot of other identity providers, they kind of give you a box that you then customize. So you can go and add custom UI, custom styling, and you change like the settings for the box in a dashboard somewhere. And Stytch is kind of an alternate approach. We give you a direct API, and you can use that to build whatever experience you want. And then the UI that like wraps that API is maybe what you start out with. But this is not how we intend, I think, a lot of people to consume the product once they want to get into very more advanced phases and they want more customization.
Okay.
And so that consent screen that was like very, very highly customized, like very stylized, like that consent screen is total custom UI that then wraps our OAuth consent API.
I was going to say, that's really an awesome looking screen. I love that.
Yeah. So just very different like parts of the market, like different ways to think about building an authorization server. But back to ChatGPT. So now we've got this Chatagotchi app installed, and I can go and say, Chatagotchi, what tools are available? And now ChatGPT will look at what tools are available and sees there's a new game tool. It needs a name for my virtual pet. What do you want to name him?
Let's go AJ. That's our codingcat.dev mascot, folks.
All right, maybe we'll be lucky and get a cat. So now Chatagotchi wants to invoke a tool, and ChatGPT is, of course, going to ask me, are you able to, do you want to do this? And I confirm, I say yes. Now, in the background, ChatGPT is spinning up an MCP client, connecting to that MCP server and sending this tool call.
And
And
the like waiting in this UI part, is that part of the SDK or is
mhm.
that something you had to make?
Yeah, this is something I made.
Okay.
Oh, we didn't get a cat, we got a lizard. But we see inside here, this is an iframe.
Okay.
And then inside this iframe, we have a little bit of HTML. And so inside our MCP server, which we might get to later, basically I am returning this HTML as part of a resource.
Gotcha.
And so ChatGPT takes that resource, drops it into the iframe, and then inside my script, I have the logic to render that loading screen. So that loading screen is something that you can customize and make it, for your own brand and your own identity.
Very cool. That's really neat to be able to see this live.
Yeah. So now we got our lizard. We see this is the tool input that we put in, and then this is the tool output that we got. So our last action was invoking the new game, and now we have our pet state that is then rendered by, this is a little React, kind of a micro front end.
Okay. Nice.
And then we could go and feed AJ. We could play with AJ. What do you want to do next?
I think we should at least feed him just to make him a little happy.
And our tool has a schema, and the schema takes in certain inputs. And so because ChatGPT is inspecting that MCP schema, it knows that I can only feed AJ an apple, a cookie, or a salad, or a pizza.
What happens if you said burger? What like does it do?
And chat says no. And this is kind of one of the really fun parts that I've had building this is like ChatGPT understands the app and is kind of co-playing it with you.
Yeah,
Kind of
that's
like a
really neat.
Dungeons and Dragons, like a dungeon master experience almost.
Yeah. Well, how many steps this way? And like, oh no, you ran into X. All those games. The roll and turn based. That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess we should feed him pizza to make him happy. Super happy.
Yeah. So same as before, ChatGPT is going to invoke a tool. It should ask my permission to do so. I want to say, yeah, of course.
While it's working, I'm kind of curious, like
Mm-hmm.
how many tools on like your typical flow, not demo flow or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
How many tools do you think you typically just roll with?
I generally like when I'm a developer and I'm using like Claude Code, I try to keep it under 10 tools. I almost
Okay.
always am only connected to a single MCP server at a time. I don't usually mix and match.
Okay, that's good to know. I feel like I do a lot of like Firebase stuff, and I have like probably about 5 MCP servers that are always going with like the full tool gamut. So
Oh, how do you find that usually the agent is pretty good at like picking the correct tool?
as long as you use the right terms for what you're looking for, yes. I probably do a lot of slash commands too because I use Gemini
Mm-hmm.
CLI, so it's pretty useful on that side of it. But it gets it right like 95% of the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
always impressed. Cool. He has more stamina and happiness now. I love it. His health, he's probably going to die if I keep feeding him pizza, though. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah,
And
yeah.
so, yeah, the MCP server, like all we are doing, and the only thing that ChatGPT is ChatGPT is seeing this JSON output.
Yeah.
And everything else here is chat kind of like narrating the tool, narrating the app experience going along.
That's amazing. That's so cool that it's like predictively, maybe not predictively, like prescribed, but then it knows what to do with those prescriptions and what's happening and things like that. It's very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to check out if, unless you have more to
Mhm.
demo here, I'd love to see your MCP server if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you want to see the code or hop into the inspector?
Oh, both, if possible. Let's do the inspector first because it just makes more sense from where we're at. And then if you still have time, I'd love to see the code.
Hmm. Yeah. So here's our MCP inspector. I don't usually use the open source one anymore. I'm usually playing around in MCP Jam. It just lets me, talk to multiple MCP servers at once and has some other niceties. Like I think this is the only inspector that actually supports ChatGPT, like the new Apps SDK.
Okay, cool.
So I've also got the MCP server running locally, and this is the local copy. I could also point this at the remote copy as well. And then inside, two interesting things. First, we've got the tools. So we might actually be able to continue our game right here. You know, if we go and we feed AJ another pizza, then we see,
So
well,
you're
now he's grown up.
I was gonna say you're blowing my mind a little bit. I must have missed something. Did you log in again so it knew who AJ was?
Oh, I think I was logged in previously before we
Okay.
started the cast.
I was just
But
like,
yeah, I was already
wow.
logged in.
So there's actually some context at play here, right?
Hmm.
That's not necessarily Chat GPT, but something else keeping it.
Yeah, that's the whole point of logging in the first place. Like, we don't really need to have authentication on these MCP servers if they're not doing anything with user data. So if you
Makes
have
sense.
an MCP server that is, you know, read me a poem from these lists of poetry, and you're returning the same data to anyone who connects, then you don't need to build an authorization flow. You don't need to build OAuth. You don't need to have the concept of a user. You just like make an API that returns data when it's called.
Cool. Have you played around at all with this is stuff we've been talking about and thinking about when you actually do the OAuth flow, maybe for this, you're like the Tamagotchi overlord, and so you get access to all of them versus like, just starting out as a junior, you would only get like one MCP tool even. So you're only
Mm-hmm.
allowed to like feed them. You can't even create them. Have you kind of gotten into any of that with even the tool chain or like the tools itself kind of letting the MCP
Mm-hmm.
server have access to it, or the client, I should say,
Yeah,
have access to it?
Yeah, that is actually an incredibly interesting question because of the security model that ChatGPT is approaching with this, where they're basically not allowing dynamic tool creation at all.
Really? So
So,
once they discover a tool, you can't like wipe it for
mhm.
someone else logging in?
Yeah, so if I go into when I connected this MCP server initially, ChatGPT went and it scanned all of the actions and all of the tools in the server. And then it goes and it like preserves that and it caches it locally. And I think this is their attempt to avoid like rug pull attacks,
Yeah,
where a tool changes its definition out from under you and starts doing
sure.
something different later on. And inside the Chat GPT docs, I found this very interesting in their app developer guidelines. Once your app is listed in the directory, names, signatures, and descriptions are locked. And if you want to significantly change your tool behavior, add a new tool, change the way that it's called, then you have to resubmit the app for review, and they're going to actually have a human look at it.
Wow. So I find this really, really fascinating because part of the MCP spec
Mm-hmm.
allows you to change out tools and it can be under an authenticated call.
Mm-hmm.
So like Max can log in and have a different tool set than what Alex can log into and have a totally another one. So that's interesting. I might have to dive into that a little more.
Yeah, and all of this is still very new. Like, this is
Yeah.
very much an open beta. It launched, I think, what is it? It's the 20th. It's 2 weeks to the day. So
Wow.
like how this is going to look, a year from now, 2 years from now might be very different.
Oh yeah. I think we'll all be out of jobs 2 years from now. Don't worry about it.
But OpenAI is really locking down and saying, you know what? I want your server to be consistent. I want it to do the same thing every time. I want it to be like a classic API and for you not to ship breaking changes and new behavior.
Yeah, for
I
sure.
want almost a manual upgrade process for every step of the way. And we'll see if it stays like that. We'll see if it goes in a different direction later.
Yeah. Well, I would love to take a look at your code for your server
Mm-hmm.
if you wouldn't mind. Yeah, so Max just showed us a kind of his Tamagotchi version on Chatagotchi, right? App
Mm-hmm.
for ChatGPT's app SDK, and then to do that, he created a MCP server and some other things, and he's going to break down the code for us now.
Yeah, absolutely. So all this code, I'm sure we can get a link in the description later. All this is on GitHub. Um, and this goes into, there's actually 3 specific parts that we're deploying to 3 separate locations in order to build this experience. And all of them live together in this repo. And so we've got of course, our MCP server, which is going to look very similar to other MCP servers. It's going to have resources, it's going to have tools, it's going to check authentication. It is going to have special metadata on these tools that will point these tools and connect them to the widgets, which we'll get into later. We have the website, the Chatagotchi.app, like very traditional React spa. It has our landing page that kind of explains what is the app, why does it matter, what's the point of it. But really, this exists to handle user sign up and OAuth authorization. So when we go through that OAuth flow and like give the app installation a user identity and an access token, that comes from here.
Cool.
And then finally, we have front end widgets, which are kind of these micro front ends that ChatGPT will then render inside the iframe. And so these are implemented independently, they're built independently, and they're deployed independently. And so we have kind of this kind of constellation of different assets that we spit out in order to get the experience that we want.
So in your MCP server, could you show like how you define tools?
Yeah. And most of this is going to look very typical to a regular MCP server. So we have our tool, we define it as a new game, we give it a title and a description and an input schema. And then
Just for kicks, are you using like an SDK of any kind for this?
Yeah, this is the standard TypeScript SDK.
Okay, cool, sweet.
So it's the official MCP SDK. It's not anything like third party or built on top of that.
Perfect, awesome.
We say we have this metadata that it says there's going to be an output template. So there's some sort of HTML that we want to render. And then there's some metadata where we can use to like pass certain text and context to OpenAI. So when OpenAI is invoking a tool, it'll go and it'll say, waking up your new pet in the UI. And then afterward, it'll say, say hello to your new pet in the title of that iframe. And this metadata isn't part of the core MCP spec. Maybe it will be someday. But right now it's a specifically OpenAI thing. So everything that they do is prefixed with this OpenAI attribute.
That's really cool. Do you know of anyone else kind of utilizing this yet? This is the first time I've ever seen it.
Yeah, the MCP Jam inspector that wants to go and make it easier for you to build OpenAI like style apps is also looking at these annotations. But I don't know of any other like large web presence that is doing this. Like certainly Anthropic is not looking at OpenAI annotations today.
Right. I'd be curious if they're going to continue like with that meta and like it would say, Claude or OpenAI or whatever, and like Google if it'll say Gemini / something, or if like they can kind of get that more standardized too, it'd be really nice.
Yeah. It's very, very similar to if they're like CSS browser wars earlier, where you'd have like your Moz prefix and your WebKit prefix for all these CSS attributes. And then eventually all the browsers agree, oh, it should be this way. This is how we want to do it. And then you end up with the same attribute everywhere. So I think we're going to see like a Cambrian explosion of different use cases and different things happening. And then we'll agree, oh, this is what we should do. This is the right way to do it. And it'll kind of collapse. But it took quite a while for CSS to get there. And I think that this is going to go the same way. Like
maybe the vendors will play a little more nicely than the Firefox, IE, Chromes of the world.
Yeah. As an application developer, I really, really hope so.
Yeah, me too. Very cool. Thanks for showing me that.
Yeah. So we have these meta attributes. And then here I have my MCP tool implementation where all I'm doing is I'm creating a copy of this internal game service class and invoking its new game method. And this returns the JSON of our game service of what the state is, who's my pet, how much food have they had, and so on. And I go and I return this both in the content and the structured content. So content is going to be raw text, and this content is going to be added usually directly to the LLM's content window. So anything I put in here is also going to be seen by the LLM, which is how ChatGPT knows what happened during the game. And then this structured content is not text. This is going to be JSON, and this is going to be preserved as JSON throughout. And this structured content is actually what's going to be passed into my React front-end widget later on. So I have this output template annotation that says there's a UI widget pet.html that we want to use as our output template. And if I scroll up, I have a pet status resource that uses this as the URL for the resource. And so OpenAI says, okay, I see that this tool output wants to use the pet.html resource. I see that the pet.html resource is defined here. So this is what I'm going to go and stick inside that iframe. And then the contents of this, we call it Skybridge, which I think is the OpenAI internal name for a lot of their iframe sandboxing, based on what I've seen.
I'm gonna ask you about that.
Yeah, so maybe one of them can give a better answer for why this is text HTML Skybridge as opposed to just text HTML. But then the text in here is essentially just added directly to the iframe. And so the implementation right now, it's a little gross, but we're basically saying, hey, look, there's a div with this ID, and then we want to add, just this specific script. And then to get things working locally, my local build is a little bit different than my remote build. My local build is using like Vite hot reloading or Vite hot reloading. And so this just, same thing.
Yeah, a little easier to debug.
Yeah.
Are there any requirements on their like CSS or JS, or they kind of take everything because it's an iframe, no problem?
Yeah, I am really curious to see how this develops.
Okay.
Right now, they're allowing me to go through and dynamically load, CSS and JS from other domains.
Yeah.
And I don't know if they're going to keep doing this because this means that your chats aren't deterministic. Like the chats and the widgets can change over time because you're fetching these remote assets. So this is what pet.js looks like today and how it functions today. But a year from now, if I went back to this chat, would pet.js still be there? Right. Do I want to have hashes in here? What happens if my website goes down? Do all the widgets just disappear? Or is OpenAI going to want to have like a static CDN that they proxy everything through?
That is very, very interesting. But like, I guess in the term of an iframe, maybe that's fine too. It's all sandboxed anyways. It's your app you're breaking. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's like, I can see the argument both ways for allowing JS from other sources versus like keeping everything, kind of locked and like inside the ecosystem.
Yeah.
I think that there are certain applications of AI or LLMs, like especially in like research or education, where you care much more about like, oh, this chat where I worked with an LLM to like solve a problem or prove a theorem. Like this chat is something I want to keep around for a very, very long time. I don't want this to get rot and decay.
That's a great point.
But if you're trying to just order a pizza, does it matter?
I want to know every pizza I've ever ordered. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, those are great points. This is really neat, especially for. I mean this in the most like kind way for such a like small app doing a very niche thing. You've added like all the parts and pieces anyone would need to know for a Nike.com and shown them off. So I think it's a really cool way to break it all down. This is awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
Was there anything that you learned during this that were kind of way outside the box and you're like, whoa, why is that happening? Or was it just kind of like a normal like web developer could learn this in an afternoon and build one of these out?
Yeah, I was very surprised by how easy it was to get set up. Like, there's a little bit of a learning curve and a mental curve around like the RPC model, because what happens is that structured content that my tool outputs, that is the only content that the widget gets. The widget's going
Wow.
to have that injected. There's like a window.openai.tool result field, and
Okay.
so you have to like, generally when you're doing web dev, you like call fetch, you get some data from the
Yeah.
fetch, and then you pass that data into your component. Here, like the calling of the fetch is kind of outside your control. And
Hmm.
that's a little weird to think about. But it's not like, I don't think that it is hard to think about. It's just a little bit of a learning curve.
Wow. Yeah. I That's interesting that they're doing it that way too. So I'll be really curious if that changes as well, or like what that looks like again 6 months from now. So
Yeah.
that's fun. Any last things, Max, that I completely am just dropping and forgetting to ask you, whether it's about Stitch or like MCP servers?
Let me see. I mean, I think the big thing is, if you are a consumer facing product, if you maintain a web presence and you care about Google search and that's where you get your customers, you care about making people like go to your website and buy things, then ChatGPT is a new distribution mechanism. It
Yep.
has a lot of potential to disrupt like the existing distribution mechanisms. And even if it's not ChatGPT, there are many other like chat apps. Like, you've got Claude, you've got Mistral. Maybe something is going to unseat ChatGPT in the next couple of years,
Yeah.
because everyone knows that AI and MCP is like never stable.
Totally.
And just think about how you want to reach these customers, if that's something that's important to you. And chances are, like, whatever is going to come next, maybe MCP isn't like the thing that we're all looking for. Maybe it's actually A to A. Maybe it's some as of yet unspecified other protocol. My hunch, my very very biased hunch, is that OAuth is going to have a place in it,
Okay.
because OAuth is quite a bit, you know, more mature and has been around for much longer and has, stood up to change. And so if we
Absolutely.
all decide we want to do A to A, 2 years from now, A to A is still going to support OAuth.
Yeah. I think that everything I've heard too is like A is kind of additive to the MCP protocol as well, and so like it's kind of interesting that there's so much adoption around MCP. But to your point,
Mm-hmm.
I think OAuth will be there no matter what. So you better understand it. There might be some like fine grained auth or some. I keep forgetting the acronym for the other one, but it's natural language authentication coming down the pipe as well. So a lot of fun things coming. Max, thank you so much for joining me today and talk a little bit about Stitch, OAuth, MCP servers. So happy to have you, and I hope you come back. I want to see another Tamagotchi-ish app that you're building next.
Yeah, next OpenAI Dev Day, I'll show you whatever I spin up.
Love it. Cool. Thank you again, Max.